When Nkechi arrived at her uncle's place in Lagos, she thought to herself, wow, this is going to be my new life, a life of affluence and luxury. I can't wait to live my dream life here. I brought you from the village to Lagos and gave you a better life. That is not enough for you. You are here talking about university. Me? Nightclub every day, auntie. Chinwe replied her, yes, you. Nightclub every day. What is wrong with that? Are you saying you are better than other girls that do it? Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful girl named Nkechi. Nkechi was a very smart and humble girl. She was brought from the village to the city to live with her father's younger brother after her father's death when she was only 16 years old. Her uncle, Maduka, was a very wealthy businessman. He was married to Chinwe, a very beautiful Lagos socialite, and together they had three sons and one daughter. When Nkechi arrived at her uncle's place in Lagos, she thought to herself, wow, this is going to be my new life, a life of affluence and luxury. I can't wait to live my dream life here. But little did she know that her uncle did not bring her all the way to Lagos to live her so-called dream life, but to be enslaved. Before her father's death, Nkechi just finished writing her O-level exams and came out in flying colors. Her father told her that her uncle Maduka had promised to sponsor her university education, which made her more excited. Unfortunately for her, her uncle never had any plan for Nkechi to further her education. He brought her to Lagos as his new house help. While Maduka's daughter Zara and her twin brother Eze, who were both Nkechi's age mates, were newly enrolled in one of the best private universities in the country, and the two other children, Afam and Otito, who were still in secondary school, attended the best secondary school in Lagos as day students. Nkechi was made to sit at home and do all the chores in the house, including washing the cars. At first, she thought it was a test of her submissiveness because she never believed her uncle could be that wicked to bring her all the way from the village to Lagos only to become a house girl. But time passed, nothing changed. Rather, her uncle kept increasing her workload, sometimes hitting her at the slightest provocation and calling her names. Her uncle's wife, Chinwe, was hardly ever around because she was always busy attending one party or the other. She was the one who came up with the idea of bringing Nkechi from the village to Lagos to become their new housemaid. She suggested to her husband, honey, instead of getting a new house help, why not just bring your niece Nkechi from the village to stay with us? With that, we won't need to pay any salary to any useless house help. Maduka replied her, it's true, honey. I never thought of that. Don't worry. Immediately after her father's burial, I'll bring Nkechi to live with us. During his brother's burial, when the villagers saw how Maduka spent money lavishly, they were all envious of Nkechi, wishing their children too would have the privilege of moving in with such rich and generous uncle to live with him in the city. But few of the villagers questioned Maduka's display of wealth, saying among themselves, so Maduka had all this money, yet he could not give his brother good medical care. He allowed him die as a poor man. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, Nkechi sat on her bed one evening, remembering her late father's words. When you pass your exams, your uncle Maduka will train you through university. She thought to herself, since Uncle Maduka has not brought up the issue of my studies yet, I think I should discuss it with him. The next morning, Nkechi went to her uncle, greeted him politely and thanked him for everything he had done for her, even though one would wonder what had he really done for her. She said to him, Uncle, the reason I'm here this morning is to discuss my university education with you. Maduka's countenance changed immediately. What about it? He roared. Nkechi, with strong determination in her voice, said to him, Uncle, my father told me when I am done with my O-level exams, you promised to send me to the university to further my studies. Her uncle looked at her with rage and said, Nkechi, now I know you are an ungrateful girl. I brought you from the village to Lagos and gave you a better life. That is not enough for you. You are here talking about university. Before I open my eyes, I need you to get out of my sight and never you dare bring up this issue ever again. Nkechi, crying profusely, walked out of the dining room disappointed. When Chinwe got back home that evening, Maduka told her about Nkechi's discussion with him. She was very furious and told her husband, Now I see that your useless niece is now growing wings. I guess it's high time we taught her a lesson she'd not forget in a hurry. Later that day, Chinwe called Nkechi and told her that starting from the next day, she would be going to her uncle's nightclub to help out every day after doing her chores and preparing meals. Nkechi was shocked. Me? Nightclub every day, auntie? Chinwe replied her, Yes, you. Nightclub every day. What is wrong with that? Are you saying you are better than other girls that do it? Nkechi, not knowing what to say, simply said to her, I'm sorry, auntie. You better be. She replied angrily and told her, Now get out of my sight, useless thing. And she walked away, leaving Nkechi looking confused and hopeless. The following day, at about 6 p.m., after doing all her daily chores and preparing dinner for the children and their parents, Nkechi set out for her uncle's nightclub, which was over 5 kilometers distance from the house. She wasn't given any money for transportation, so she walked all the way to the club to resume as a waitress at the club. When the club manager Bimbo saw her, she immediately took interest in her. She called her to her office and told her, Your uncle told me you'd be resuming work here and he wants me to treat you with an iron fist. But seeing how pretty and innocent you are, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you have a good time here and no one harasses you. Nkechi was surprised, seeing how sweet Bimbo was to her. Since she left her father's house, she had never experienced such kindness from anyone, not even her uncle, whom she thought would become like a father to her. Bimbo taught her everything about being a waitress, and in no time, Nkechi became so good at it, and she truly enjoyed doing the job. Being a young, pretty, and innocent girl, working in a nightclub, Nkechi got a lot of advances from men, but she never paid attention to them. Even with Bimbo, the club manager, being protective of her, she was often harassed by men who saw every girl working in a nightclub as sex objects. Meanwhile, every time Nkechi saw different men coming in and out of her uncle's office with briefcases, she would often wonder what the men usually come to do in the office because they were not customers. She curiously asked Bimbo, Auntie, who are those men with briefcases that always come to my uncle's office every night? Bimbo looked at her in surprise. Nkechi, she said, you have to be very careful about the things you see and the questions you ask in this club. There are things that even me don't know anything about here, but I choose to mind my business, and you should do the same, she cautioned her. From Bimbo's response, Nkechi knew there was more to the nightclub and her uncle's business than met the eyes. She had been warned to mind her business, so she was ready to do exactly that. But one fateful day, While she was walking past her uncle's office, Nkechi overheard him talking to someone on the phone on top of his voice, so she decided to listen in. "Don't tell me that!" her uncle roared. "Are you telling me he could not make a simple delivery across just 3 countries in 1 week? Look, your boy better deliver my consignment on time, otherwise he'll cut his tiny dick and deliver to my clients." Nkechi was shocked hearing such threats from her uncle. She quickly walked away so no one would notice her. From that day on, she started looking into her uncle's businesses secretly and gathering information about his dealings. 4 years had passed. Zara and her brother Eze have now graduated from the university, but Nkechi, who was promised university education, never saw the four walls of the university. Rather, she became a full-time nightclub waitress. On the twins' graduation day, Maduka threw a lavish party at his place, inviting all his friends. Chinwe, his wife, also invited her friends and social club members to grace the occasion. As usual, Nkechi was on ground to serve the invited guests. While dutifully serving her uncle's guests, a handsome young man in his mid-twenties could not get his eyes off Nkechi. After the party, he walked up to her and introduced himself as Emeka and told her he was one of her uncle's guests. They exchanged numbers, and from that day on, Nkechi and Emeka became close friends. He would often come to the nightclub just to see her and admire her beauty. Nkechi became very fond of Emeka and was always looking forward to when he would come to the nightclub, because that was the only place they could meet, as she had been given strict warning by her auntie, Chinwe, not to leave the house except when she was going to the market, church, and the club. Emeka made her feel very special and loved. He would often send her gifts and give her money. For the first time since her father's death, Nkechi felt loved and cared for and very happy once again. Sometimes she pinched herself just to make sure it wasn't all a dream, but her biggest fear was about to come true. One day, Emeka called her and asked her to meet him in a hotel close to the club. Nkechi was confused. "Why am I meeting you in a hotel? What happened to meeting at the club as usual?" she asked. Emeka told her it was very important, otherwise he wouldn't have asked her. After much hesitation, Nkechi decided to go meet him at the hotel because she trusted him and she believed Emeka would never harm her. She told Bimbo, whom she had always confided in, about Emeka's request. Bimbo encouraged her to go and at least hear what he had to say and promised to cover for her until she got back. When she got to the hotel room, Emeka told her about a new job he got in the US with a big tech company. "And I'm expected to resume immediately," he said to her. Nkechi was taken aback at first. She thought of many different things that could go wrong in her life if Emeka left for the US. "I'm happy for you, Emeka. I really am. Congratulations," she said with a smile. Emeka, noticing her countenance, said to her, "NK, don't worry, I'm not leaving you. I'm definitely going to keep in touch, and I'll come back one day to take you with me." Nkechi didn't know what to say. She was unsure of what Emeka meant, but one thing she was certain of is that Emeka truly loved her. She didn't know when she said, "I love you." Emeka was surprised to hear Nkechi say that. He quickly grabbed her and kissed her passionately. But when he attempted to make love to her, he discovered she was still a virgin. Curiously, Emeka asked her if she was truly a virgin, and she nodded in affirmation. Emeka, with mixed feelings, put on his clothes and stood up from the bed. Nkechi was embarrassed and scared at the same time. What is it, Emeka? Why are you all dressed? Why didn't you make love to me? She asked, crying. Enke, you are still a virgin. I can't take away your innocence just like that. If I must, it has to be on a very special occasion, Emeka said, smiling at her. Nkechi was happy and very satisfied to hear that. She put on her clothes and hugged him tightly. Before they left the hotel, Emeka told her the reason he didn't come to the club was because his father and her uncle, who were close friends and business associates, were having serious misunderstanding over a deal that went wrong. So, his father warned him to steer clear of the club. Nkechi wasn't at all surprised to hear this. But what surprised her was the fact that Emeka's father and her uncle were close friends. She became more curious and interested in knowing more about her uncle's business. She kept digging, searching for clues, but got nothing. One early Sunday evening, Maduka, who had been out all weekend, came back and asked Nkechi to go bring out the food he got on his way from his car. When Nkechi got to the car, she noticed a black duffel bag on the back seat of the car. She couldn't resist the urge to open the bag. She opened the bag, and to her amazement, the bag was filled with white powdered substances wrapped in transparent bag. Instinctively, she knew it was cocaine. She didn't say anything to anyone. That night, while talking to Emeka, who was already in the US, she asked him what kind of business his father was into. Emeka wasn't sure why Nkechi asked him such question. So instead of giving her an answer, he put a question back to her. NK, why are you asking about what my father does for a living at this time of the night? Nkechi, noticing he was being evasive, told him, I think my uncle is into some shady business and your father might be in on it also. Emeka paused for a while to gather his thoughts, then said to her, My dear, for your own good, I would advise you to stop trying to figure out what your uncle or my father is into. It doesn't always end well. From his response, Nkechi felt Emeka had first-hand knowledge about his father's dealings with her uncle. So, she told him about the cocaine she saw in her uncle's car. Emeka was alarmed. Nkechi, you must never mention this to anybody, and you must stop looking into your uncle's affair before you get yourself killed. Now, Nkechi became very certain Emeka knew more than he was telling. She pressured him to tell her all he knew about her uncle and his dad's business. After much hesitation, Emeka opened up to her. He told her how her uncle Maduka had been his father's close friend and business associate even before his birth, how they'd been running a very sophisticated drug cartel and using the nightclub as a front, and how his mother lost her life when he was only 12 years old because she found out about their drug business and was ready to leave him. 3 days later, his mother went missing. They searched everywhere for her, but she was nowhere to be found. The matter was reported to the police, who declared her missing and put out a missing person poster of her. After 3 weeks of searching, her body was discovered in the lagoon. His father never allowed autopsy to be conducted on her, and she was hurriedly buried the same day. Now, you see why I asked you to stop whatever you are trying to do? He asked. Your uncle has done worse things to people in order to protect his business, and I know he won't hesitate taking you out of the picture if he finds out you are snooping into his affairs, Emeka said to her. But Nkechi had gone too deep in her investigation of her uncle's shady business. She wasn't willing to give up, so she promised Emeka she'd be careful going forward. One fateful day, Chinwe, her uncle's wife, came home in the middle of the night drunk and exhausted. She laid on the couch in the sitting room and slept off. While she was sleeping, her phone started ringing inside her bag. Nkechi, worried that the call would wake her auntie up from her sleep, quickly reached for the bag to silence the phone, but what she saw came as a great shock to her. She saw many tiny wraps of cocaine inside the bag. She hurriedly silenced the phone, kept it back in the bag, and walked away before anyone would see her. Now it became clear to her why her aunt Chinwe was always out partying. She was actually selling the drugs at those parties. So she too was in her husband's illicit business, Nkechi thought to herself. Meanwhile, the relationship between her uncle and Emeka's father had grown sour over the years due to the misunderstanding they had and Maduka's indebtedness to Emeka's dad. Their fight was also telling hard on Maduka's business, especially the nightclub. His wife Chinwe suggested to him, "Honey, you know things have not really been working since your rift with your friend. And if we are unable to pay the money we owe him soon, it may become difficult to run the club and stay afloat." Maduka agreed with her but asked her, "How do we come up with over 700 million naira to settle him?" Chinwe told him, "I have an idea. Maduka, you know your friend likes women so much and he can give up anything for a woman. I've noticed the way he looks at Nkechi in the club. I'm sure he's interested in her." Maduka thought for a while and asked her, "Why do you think he would accept Nkechi, that useless girl, in exchange for writing off over 700 million naira debt?" "Don't worry about that. Just leave it to me. I know my way around him," she said, smiling. So, Maduka accepted his wife's suggestion. After all, of what use was Nkechi to them? The following day, Chinwe went to Emeka's father and presented their offer to him. She told him, "Our Nkechi is a very good and innocent girl. You can have her and do whatever you want with her. In exchange, I want you to write off the whole debt my husband owes you and for you two to be good friends again." She was shocked at his response. "Chinwe, it seems like you read my mind. My eyes have always been on your sweet, lovely Nkechi. How soon can I have her?" "As soon as you deliver her to me, your husband's debt is all gone and we are best friends again," he said, laughing. Chinwe promised him they would deliver Nkechi to him that weekend. When she got home, she told her husband what happened and he was overly excited. Quickly, they called Nkechi to tell her the good news. "Nkechi, you know you are now a grown-up woman and you won't live under our roof forever. So we have arranged a man for you. We will take you to him this weekend to start staying with him," her uncle said. Nkechi was confused. "Uncle, I don't understand. I'm just 23 years old. I haven't achieved anything in life. I don't have a degree and I don't even have any bankable experience, and you are giving me out in marriage to a man I know nothing about?" She questioned her uncle, crying. Her auntie quickly intervened. "Nkechi, my dear, the person you are getting married to is very rich. He'll take care of all you need, or do you want to go back to the village?" she asked sternly. Nkechi was dumbfounded. She stood there crying while her uncle and aunt walked away smiling. That evening, Nkechi called Emeka to tell him what her uncle and his wife told her. Emeka was surprised and very sad at the same time. He suggested she ran away to avoid being taken to whomever they wanted to marry her out to. But Nkechi, with tears in her eyes, told him she had nowhere to run to except the village, that she might just accept it as her destiny. True to her word, when the weekend came, Maduka and his wife personally packaged up Nkechi's belongings and bundled her to her supposed new husband. When she got to the compound, she was surprised how big and beautiful the house was. But she was disappointed when she met her would-be husband. He was a man old enough to be her father. To avoid any awkward situation, Maduka and his wife left immediately they dropped Nkechi off. When Nkechi got in, Emeka's father welcomed her excitedly, offering her expensive champagne which she turned down. He instructed the maids to prepare her lunch and show her to her room. Nkechi was astonished at the size and elegance of her room. She felt a sense of relief that after all things weren't as bad as she thought. After she settled in, Nkechi called Emeka to tell him she had arrived at her supposed husband's place and to tell him of her experience so far, but Emeka didn't pick the call. She tried several times but no response. She became very worried and scared. She thought Emeka had given up on her because of her soon-to-be husband. That night, Emeka's father sent one of the maids to bring Nkechi to his room. Nkechi reluctantly obeyed and went to meet the old man in his room, fearing what might happen if she refused to give in to his demands. When she got in, he gestured to her to take a seat, which she did obediently. He started by apologizing for the crude way she was brought to him by her uncle and aunt, and told her, "Nkechi, I know you are confused and scared. I also know you are a very nice and innocent girl, but you don't have to be afraid. It's not what you think." Nkechi didn't understand anything the old man was saying. "Sir, how do you mean is not what I think?" she asked oddly. He cleared his throat and started speaking. "You see, my dear, whenever I see you in your uncle's nightclub working diligently, I see great potentials in you, and I always wish you were a member of my family." At this point, Nkechi's confusion became heightened, but she held herself from saying anything. "Many years ago, me and your father used to be very good friends. Everyone in the village called us twins. After our secondary school, we came to Lagos to learn trade under one of the richest men from our village then, Chief Agu. Your father was the smart one, while I was the stubborn one. Together, we built a very strong team, and everyone working under Chief then became jealous of us because of our quick rise as apprentices. After only 3 years of coming to Lagos, your father and I started our own business selling fairly used tires. In no time, we had our own warehouse and we were supplying other vendors. We rented a decent apartment, got a decent car, and we gradually grew our business. Then one day, your father told me he wanted to bring your uncle, Maduka, who just finished his secondary school, to join us in the business. I tried to discourage him because Maduka wasn't the type of boy that listened, but your father wouldn't hear me out. Eventually, he brought Maduka to Lagos to live with us. From the moment Maduka came into our midst, it was one problem or the other every single day. It got so bad that your father had to rent a separate apartment for him. It was when Maduka started living alone he crossed paths with the Olowu brothers, who introduced him to some shady business. He brought the offer to your father and I, but your father, being a decent and upright man, turned him down. After much persuasion, I accepted to take him up on his offer against your father's warning. Oh, girl, we made a lot of money. I got carried away with the money I was making with your uncle that I abandoned my closest friend, your father, to run our second-hand tire business alone. He struggled to keep the business going but couldn't. So after few months of trying, he suggested we sell the business, which we did, and we both parted with our share of the sales. He paused and asked Nkechi, "Hope I am not boring you with my story." "Not at all, sir. Please continue. I'm enjoying the story," she said, smiling. "After selling the business, your father used his share of money to start a transportation business. He had many buses in his fleet shuttling between the east, west, and southern states. He was doing very well for himself until the federal government introduced a subsidized transportation scheme across the country. That took a hard hit on private transportation companies all over the country, including your father's. He struggled to keep the business afloat but could not. After trying all he could, he shut down the business, sold all the buses and other assets, and planned on moving back to the east to have a fresh start there. But your uncle Maduka convinced him to put the money he had into an investment scheme. After much convincing, your father decided to give it a try, so he gave your uncle all the money he had left to invest for him. Unfortunately, the said investment was a scam. Your father lost everything he had. Left with no other option, he moved back to the village where he married your mother and spent the rest of his life until his death. I blame myself every day for letting everything that happened to your father happen when I could have been able to help him one way or the other," Emeka's dad said, crying. Nkechi, with tears in her eyes, consoled him, saying, "You don't have to blame yourself for what happened to my father. It wasn't your fault. My uncle is the one to blame." After a brief moment of silence in the room, Emeka's father said, "I saw the way your uncle and his wife treated you, and I wished they could do better. So when they offered to give you in exchange for the debts your uncle owed me, I quickly seized the opportunity and accepted their offer. But sir, I'm just 23 years old. I'm not prepared for marriage yet, and even if I am, not with a man old enough to be my father," Nkechi said with sadness on her face. He let out a loud laugh, then said to her, "You are only 23 and he is only 27. You two are a perfect match." Nkechi looked at him confused. "Who is only 27, sir?" she asked, stammering. "Oh, my son, of course. You must have seen him in your uncle's nightclub," he said, showing her the screen of his phone. Nkechi exclaimed, "Sir, Emeka is your son?" "Of course. Emeka is my only child, and from your response I can see you've met him already." With a wide smile on her face, she answered, "Yes, I have met him. Me and Emeka, we are good friends." He was very happy to hear that Emeka and Nkechi were friends already, so he called Emeka and gave Nkechi the phone. When he heard her voice, he was surprised. "What are you doing with my father at this time of the night?" he asked curiously. Nkechi narrated everything to him. Emeka was speechless. "So you are the wife my father has always said he had for me." They both burst into laughter. Emeka apologized for not picking her call earlier, that he was busy with work. Nkechi said teasingly, "Now that I'm going to become your wife, hope you won't be too busy to pick my call." Emeka replied, "No, Your Highness. I can never be too busy for you, my queen." The following week, Emeka's father went to Maduka and his wife to discuss Nkechi's wedding with them. He told them he would rather his son Emeka marry their niece and he would want the marriage to happen immediately. Chinwe called her husband aside to have a word with him. "What have we done to ourselves?" she asked angrily. Her husband responded, "I don't understand." "So that useless girl will marry Emeka and she will now become very wealthy. What do we do now? We can't allow Emeka marry her," his wife said. "My dear, there's nothing we can do except you have 700 million naira to give to his father." With that, they went back to Emeka's father and told him they approved of the wedding. Nkechi continued living with Emeka's dad, and 6 months later, Emeka came back to Nigeria for his marriage to Nkechi. Their marriage was the biggest the village had ever experienced. The who's who in the state and beyond were all in attendance. Maduka and Chinwe were also in attendance, but unlike others, they hid themselves in shame considering how badly they treated Nkechi. After the wedding, Emeka took his beloved wife Nkechi with him to the US. Upon arriving in the US, Nkechi enrolled in the university to fulfill her dream of becoming a university graduate, and she lived happily with her husband Emeka in love and wealth. Whereas the Drug Law Enforcement Agency got an anonymous tip about Club Dukas being a front for drugs peddling, so they raided the club and truly, they found tons of drugs in the premises. The club was shut down permanently and Maduka was arrested. To settle the matter out of court, Maduka sold the house they were living in and used bulk of the proceeds to settle the drug case. With the little money left, he relocated his family to the village to start a new chapter of their lives. They moved into Nkechi's father's hut because Maduka didn't build a house in the village. Maduka and his family became the laughingstock of the entire village. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe and share to your friends and loved ones. Bye.